Hello, welcome to this next Substance Designer tutorial. This is going to be an ever so simple one. I want to try and show how you can make patterns and shapes really, with just a few nodes. It doesn't have to be super complicated. So, within Substance Painter, there's lots and lots of textures, and they're all kind of dynamic. You can change a few parameters like grids and noises and all sorts of things. And I'm pretty sure that quite a lot of those were just made here with this kind of technique. Probably a bit more complicated, but not far off. So let's have a look. So I've created a new graph and I've called it shapes just to get me going. And I'm going to start with a shape node. So if I press the space bar and type in shape, I will get a shape up. So the default shape is a square. But I want to show you that there's a few options down here you can do to change it. So we can change the scale of our shape. We can change it, in the X and the Y. We're not limited there. And we can also angle it. And if we turn on this safe rotation here, rotate 45, it will be a tiling safe rotation. It won't be exactly the rotation you see here, it will be the closest safe rotation to it. Okay, so with that said, let's pop all these back to about 0 or default. And of course we have a lot of other shapes within here. We have discs and paraboloids, we have the bell and the Gaussian, the thorn, etc, etc, etc. So with just a few kind of adjustments we can make quite, not complicated but quite useful shapes with this. So one of the first things I like to do when starting this process is just tile it once, and that gives me 4 objects, four of my shape in a tiled fashion, and then I can start to mess about with the scale. So I can take it lower, or if I just type over here, say to 2, it gives me a chance to go higher. So we can really manipulate these shapes in lots of ways. And similarly on the X and Y size, this is almost a suggested limit if you like, but if you overtype it you can change it. So I've just increased the Y to 2, and now I can up and down that beyond more than 1 essentially. So let me reset my initial scale to 1, overall scale to 1, and I'm just going to increase my Y scale up to about 2.25 or 6, whichever looks good basically. Now we can also rotate this. So if I rotate, I'm going to get like an offset value. So if I put it something like, I don't know, 33, or even perhaps a bit more than that, well, let's try 45 just for fun. So now I've got these kind of going in a thread kind of pattern. I've got an angle on there and I've just got a huge gap between, which is not really what I want, but I can adjust my scales to deal with that. So not necessarily my Y scale here, but if I overtype my X scale I can adjust that to make a kind of fatter stitch if you like. So you can basically play with this as you want. I'm going to increase that so that the tips touch, and that's going to help me in the next kind of stage. So that's all very well, but it's not actually looking like a pattern yet. But we can pop that into another node. So if I press space here, and I'm going to use a safe transform. There we go, and I'll pop that in there. And on this safe transform I'm going to tile again. And now I'm starting to see what my pattern looks like. So now I'm starting to get something vaguely interesting out. And if I poke that into the height and pop that into the normal, we should start to see what's going on. and my height's not showing up, and I'm not entirely sure why. Let me check my scene. I'm on the high res plane. Perhaps it's not viewing, so if I right click view in 3D and pick height, maybe not. Let's take that out. I know it is showing, look, it's just I've got no colour in there, so it doesn't show up very easily. Okay, let's pop that in the colour and then we'll be able to see properly. There we go. Well, better. So with those, with that done, I can now just go back here and start to, you know, adjust to get to where I want to be. So if I reduce that, you see it squeezes down, and if I increase it, it's going to start to move upwards. Similarly on the X value, and you can mess around with this for as much time as you like until you get a kind of pattern you're looking for. And that's getting kind of close to something useful. But between these two, I want to put another node, and I found this purely by accident, which is how I find everything, frankly. I'm not educated. I plug things into other things and see what happens. That's about the extent of my talent. So I'm going to select on this line and press space and type in slope blur grayscale, and then I'm going to plug this into the bottom as well, and you'll see that that has purely by luck on my part softened everything out and sharpened up the edges, which is exactly what I want. So I can take the intensity of this down and I can take it up, and you know, get to where you want to be. Another thing to try is the mode. So the mode will depend on how things happen. So if you switch it to min, it will give you the minimum values, you know, the lowest values of the of the equation. If I set it to max, it will go to the max, and blur is just kind of the default. Sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. So if I want to, I could put this to min, and now I get a kind of softer transition between the blobs, but I do get a little bit of darkness in between. And if I set it back to blur, I get it a more defined shape. And of course, you know, you don't have to stop here. We can mess around ad infinitum, really. So I can up and down these, move them around, and just tweak until you get a kind of shape that you're really happy with. Okay, so there we have it. It's not the most exciting shape in the world, but you know, I can see that being useful somewhere, you know, when I use it in Substance Painter. So that's a basic overview of this, and in the next one we'll just go through a few options and you know, experiment with different shapes, and then at the end what we'll do is make this usable within Substance Painter. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so I'm just going to duplicate this by pressing Ctrl and D and moving that off to one side, so I've got a copy of it just in case. So we can always go back to this shape, and to preserve our can I put it, resolution, I can bring this down to 1 now. I only had it on 2 there to get me a good idea of what it would look like, and all it really means is if I want more tiling, I just have to do it over on this node here. There we go. The other thing is then, these settings look good for the Gaussian, perhaps they'll look good for something else. So I have a look to see what else I get out of it using the other shapes. So here's one with the thorn, and that gives me an odd sort of shape, but I can see it being vaguely useful. And we've got the brick, which is Not very useful because it hasn't got a border, so I just need to kind of bring it in a bit. No, that one's really not going to do anything. Let's try it with the square and rescale that one. There we go, just have to bring it down quite a lot. So that's quite useful, I think. Maybe not in that respect, but if I increase my width, maybe I'll get to the point where I've got kind of a brick path. There we go. So yes, as you can see, you know, it doesn't take too much before you start to get out things that could be actually useful with just a few nodes. You know, nothing, you know, so complicated, you know, to see it all you can't read anything. But you know, it's still useful. Doesn't have to be complicated to be useful. So let's have a look at the gradation. Yeah, there we go. Might not be quite right, but we've got some roof tiles going on there, I think, or something pretty close to it. Let's see what we can do. Whoops, that's overlapping. Don't want it to overlap. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so sorry, I'm getting lost in my own experimentation. Waves is usually quite fun. There we go, we have some odd little things going on there. It's quite good actually. It's like a massive row of hot dogs or burgers, depending upon the angle you're looking. So yes, we've got all sorts of shapes here. And it takes, you know, just a bit of experimentation just to go through and have a good look and see what you can come up with. There you go. So we've got 3 or 4 nodes, 3 in this case, and just plug them in, experiment, see what happens. Okay, so I'm just going to detach this one and reattach this one to that one, and there's an easy way to do that. So if you press the shift key and then grab these outputs and plug them into where you want them to go, it will just plug in, and I can delete that one and we're ready to go. Right, so let me put the tiling to this back to 1, and in the next video we're going to make this usable in Substance Painter and changeable in Substance Painter, which is very useful to be able to do. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so once you've made your pattern and you're happy with it and you want to use it in Substance Painter, we can start to look at, you know, how we'd want to use it. And you know, for this one I would perhaps want to maybe adjust the amount of tiles that that are in there, and we can do that. So if we go to this Safe Transform Grayscale here, and on the tile parameter there's a little 3 lines with a downward arrow box there. If we click that, we can expose that as a new graph input, and we can give it an identifier, and it's best to give it ones that aren't all that generic. Tile is, you know, could be anything. So tile amount, and I'll give it the same label. So Control C, Control V. We've got a min max value that we can set, so you can set those, and you know, perhaps you'd want to limit it, because if you tile it too much on this one, you're going to lose a bit of fidelity. So perhaps I'd set that to 8. Clamp, false, let's set that to true. Let's set it to false. And steps. So once you've done that, we can click OK. And then you'll notice that this isn't available in our instance parameter. It will be available at our graph level. And if you double click on the graph in an empty spot, we should see tile amount, and now we can control it from here. But crucially, we will also be able to control it in Substance Painter from the graph parameters which will be available. So perhaps you've got a setup which works really well with a number of shapes. Perhaps you'd want to expose the shape. So on the shape parameter here, we could also expose the pattern. So if we expose that as a new graph, we've got lots of options. We've got the default option there, and let's, I don't know, call it pattern shape. And then I'll pop that into the label as well. There we go. So you might actually, coming in here, say perhaps, well, this doesn't work with the square, let's get rid of it, and it doesn't work with the brick, let's get rid of that one. So you can actually remove options that it doesn't work with. Okay, so when we click OK on there, again, it's not available here anymore. If we double click in the graph, we've got tile amount and pattern shape, and we've got a drop down list with all these options in that we can then use. So all that's left really is to publish it. So I like to save my package first, so let's save the package because I haven't saved it before. Let's call it pattern export, and then we can right click on it and publish the SBSAR file. This will be in my textures directory. Let's generate the missing icon, and that's what I get. And yep, let's publish that one. There we go, so that's publishing it. And in the next little video, what we'll do is have a look at what it looks like. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so let me get Painter up, and I've got my directory open here with my new SBSAR in it, and I'm going to drag and drop that onto my library shelf here. It only gives me the choice of a base material, so all imported resources, let's pop it to the current session and click import, and then it will pop up down here in my materials. And I've got the tiling sampler up from Open Samples. I'm just going to pop a layer in there, and I'm going to add the shapes to it, and there we get it. It looks a bit different because the kind of tiling scale and the displacement scales are a little bit different. Let me adjust my displacement height. Let's make that 0.01. That's usually a good number. That looks more like the actual one. I think I've made a mistake, and let me have a look. Color, yeah, there is, yeah, I left the color in. Height, rough, metal, and normal. So I didn't really touch these. I could have in the designer area. I mean, they're there, but there's nothing in them. They're just like default values, so I could have just deleted those and it would have been better, I think. And these, oops, because they're just loose nodes. Let's do that right there. So I'd need to republish that to make that change. But yes, but now I could use this. I'm not going to use this layer for anything particularly exciting, except I will build upon it to build up my texture. And the exciting thing is, of course, we have our tiling options. So as we set our tile amount in here, I can go beyond, and that's great. And I also have my pattern changes. So I could go to the half bell, and whoops, we could go to waves. We can pick any one. As you can see, I haven't created something which works well with a lot of shapes, but I wanted to kind of demonstrate it to give you a an idea of what can be done. well, that's a good one. I like that one. Except for the colour. The colour doesn't come out very well, but if I blitz the colour, yeah, there we go. So, yes, there you go. So you don't need an awful lot of nodes to get some sort of good pattern out of, you know, something useful out of Substance Designer. You can, you know, make your own patterns and make your own shapes with a few nodes and publish it and reuse it. So I hope you found that useful. I hope it, you know, at least expanded your understanding of Substance Designer a little bit, and I hope to talk to you in another video set. So I'll talk to you then.